All right, I think we are live now. Um, my big brothers Andrew and Chris have given me the keys to the kingdom. So today I have. Do you go by Doctor Ari Gross or Ari?
No, I mean, Ari is fine.
Ari. Okay, so I have Ari here from True. Let me do a quick bio. So my guest today is Dr. Ari Gross, founder of True, and the company's chairman and chief innovation officer. Ari has been a trailblazer in applying AI to automated document intelligence and decisioning with more than 2 decades. Ari, I think right before we started, you said 3 decades of work across artificial intelligence, computer vision, and data science. He founded True to bring real time, trusted data and AI to mortgage lending at scale. And today he's driving the company's AI strategy and leads its research lab focused entirely on the lending industry. Before True, he led C Vision Technologies, working on image compression, OCR, and business process automation, then launched Softworks AI, which ultimately evolved into True. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Johns Hopkins and a PhD in Computer Science from Columbia University. So that was a Claude written bio, which is kind of like our typical intro. Andrew is the one who pioneered this tradition, so we have to keep it going. So hopefully that was a good background, but I would love to, understand how did you like what was like 30 years ago or 40 years ago, like coming out of college, like what was your career path? Like how'd you end up in mortgage in the first place? And can you like do a high level overview of how you ended up where you are today?
Sure. Let me do that. I was a computer science major at Columbia, and I was looking interested in AI and crypto, I guess. And then I went
And
more towards AI and computer vision, not crypto, although still very interested in that area. But essentially, I became a professor, computer vision, and we were found ways in the lab to compress and OCR documents very quickly and very accurately. So we got involved in that space and we started patenting in that space. So we got a lot of clients that were bank clients and lending clients because I guess they had to deal with very large mortgages. So when we sold CVision, we focused on PDF technology, which we licensed some of it back to Adobe. Then in this new company, which is now called True, we said, how do we use whatever we're learning here in AI, classification, documents? How do we accelerate the home lending process? So it was more our initial clients in the PDF OCR space were lenders and they wanted us to solve those issues. Like Rocket Mortgage was a large client. So we
yeah.
sort of morphed into that space because that's where our clients took us.
And why did you pick computer science when you were in undergrad? That was like some time ago. So like was that like that's not the hot thing to do back then, was it?
Well, I wasn't a computer scientist in Hopkins. I was a mathematician.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
when I went to Columbia, I could have done a PhD in math, but it looked like this is like early '90s. It looks like computer science was sort of taken off.
Okay.
So I said, why don't I pivot? So I sort of switched from a PhD in math to computer science because it looked like there'd be more outside opportunities outside of academia, maybe startup opportunities.
Sure. And then what was your first job out of college?
First job out of college, I worked for 1 year. So I had a looking for an academic slot, but in the meantime, someone called me, a headhunter, and he said, "Do
Okay.
you want to work for this guy, Paul Tudor Jones?" So Paul came by helicopter from Greenwich, and he was a billionaire guy, and we were on the 51st floor of One Liberty Plaza. So I worked for Paul for a year, writing
Okay, that's
trading
cool.
systems. Yeah, it was cool. We're trying to outtrade the traders, and I did that for a year, and I thought about staying in there, but then I
Okay.
just went into academia. Went to academia.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you were a professor for some time and also doing research?
Yeah, I was about 15 years as a professor in City University in Queens in
Okay.
the Kinney Grad Center. And then we had a lot of good ideas in the laboratory, and we said, what, maybe we can actually productize some of these. So I left the lab with some students and we started CVision. That was the first startup for me.
Okay.
And we said, there's going to be a better way than TIFF. TIFF was how they moved documents around 20 years ago, but very, very, very cumbersome. You couldn't move a 100-page mortgage, let alone a 1,000-page mortgage document anywhere using TIFF. So we helped develop a new standard for PDF. I mean, it's called JPEG 2, and Adobe licenses it, and
Okay.
it's about 50 to 100 times more compact than TIFF was. So that really enables you to scan large documents and move
Gotcha.
them around the internet, efficiently.
Gotcha. Um, I've heard about the AI winter. So it sounds like you were part of one of the early pioneers of using AI back in the 90s and early 2000s. And then from what I've understood, that there was like a period of time where AI just didn't really get the love and attention. And now all of a sudden it's the rage. So can you tell a little bit from your perspective or add color into a little bit of that and what that, the history and kind of like the background there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been probably more than one winter that I can think of. Initially, it was a whole hype with AI. There was a book about perceptrons and Minsky back. I mean, even before I worked for Paul Tudor Jones, AI was supposed to do stuff, and then it really didn't deliver. And I got
Okay,
very downplayed. Then all of a sudden, in the early 90s, we started using backprop neural nets, an extension of neural net technology that really did work. And we built trading systems that were effective. And that's really got a lot of attention. That was in the 90s. That's when you
okay.
got companies like D.E. Shaw to
Yep,
start doing automated trading, automating trading of stocks. So there was a lot of significant stuff that happened. It's such that the market got into a bit of a frenzy around 2000, saying, "Oh, the internet's going to solve all your problems," and everything
yep,
was very hyped up in 2000.
yeah,
Then you had this internet crash where you said, "You know what? AI has been hyped up too much. It's not delivering," and things got very much devalued and prices got reset. And I think people were a little bit jaded, saying, AI's talked a lot, but they haven't really delivered. I mean, my car's not driving itself. My
sure.
work isn't doing itself. I mean, I'm still
Yep,
doing all the work here. So people got jaded saying AI is not working.
yeah,
And then I think this next big hurdle here was with transformers and starting with the Google paper in 17, but really probably with open text and ChatGPT, where it said, wait a second, it really can do work for me now. It can write a term paper for me. It's actually probably better than I can write it. Might
sure.
have taken it on a tangent. Maybe it's lost the theme of what I wanted to say, but an
Yeah,
awfully good term paper here in about 10 seconds. So all of a sudden, people started seeing probably last year and a half, 2 years ago,
yeah,
that hey, AI is actually starting to kick in beyond the hype. It's getting work done for me, for my
yeah.
company.
And then just to summarize, like, your first half of your career kinda at, CVision, from what I understand, the state of the industry was that there was this, I guess, like, methodology or, protocol called TIFF, that was at the time, the current way of, parsing or understanding, PDFs, and you developed I forget, I think JV something, as like a new protocol to be able to read and understand what the context is on a PDF much faster, more efficiently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was using fax machines back in the day, like 30 years ago, and you'd fax like a two-page paper over to your doctor or your university, and maybe it went through, maybe you had to resend it. It was not a standard that could work when you
Sure.
dealt with 100, 200, 1,000-page documents. Something had to be done, and we worked with Adobe, and we helped develop the JPEG-2 standard, became an ISO format, and that's why PDFs today are much more compact than
Okay.
the fax protocol of 20 years ago, which was a TIFF protocol.
Got it. Okay, fascinating. And so that was the C Visions side of your career, and now the true side of career. You're saying, hey, we've been able to build technology to actually understand what's on these PDFs. Now, how do we actually apply it and take leverage that context and that data to, in this case, in the lending space, essentially. Is that a good way to summarize the high
I think
level
that's a
main
really
story?
good way to. Yeah, I think so. I mean, what we did in C Vision was because we were a machine learning group, is in the TIFF format, you would actually send all these dots
Mhm.
over. So a normal scan page got 9 million dots, and the
Sure.
cost of sending 9 million dots over is very expensive. Instead, we started learning all the fonts on the page,
Okay.
sort of the way you generate them using Microsoft, right? So you generate them, you've got fonts, and you laid out the fonts. We started understanding all the fonts, putting a font library together, and that's all part of the JPEG too. Is you're not focused on pixels, you're focused on the fonts, or you're inverting the generative process. They were generated, understand how they were generated,
Okay.
invert that, and you get a much more compact representation. Okay, that's what we did in C Vision, right? So what we're doing here, a little bit similar, is we're trying to understand each document. It was generated with certain intent. So let's reverse that generative process. Let's understand everything about it.
Sure.
Was it signed? Was it initialed? Do these values check sum? Do we understand everything about your bank statement, including does all the table information check sum out? So let's be sure we understand it almost at the generative level,
Yeah.
right? You had a really simple model. When you sent it to print or whatever, it was in Word, it was compact, and it was well understood. So let's move it from pixels or a lot of things we don't understand to be sure it's a fully understandable document. Let's reverse the generative process. We understand which version it is, be sure we have final versions. So we want to use that same level of depth and fully understanding alone and
Yeah.
hopefully minimize the human coefficient that we need to get
Gotcha.
this work done.
And then why lending? You mentioned, I think, at CVision, some of your clients were like Rocket Mortgage, some of the banks and things like that. But like, was there any specific reason why you chose mortgage as like your primary kind of like vertical? Or is the vision for the company that you start with mortgage and then you kind of expand into other use cases? Because that's two separate.
I think it's a really good question. There's nothing about mortgage per se. If you want to automate fintech, mortgage is just one place, right? But it's a
Yeah.
good place because it's a place that seems to be very inefficient. If you look at what needs retooling, it
Hmm.
looks like it's very inefficient. It needs retooling. Again, the average home loan is taken 4 to 6 weeks, right?
Yep.
So a long time. When you go into a dealership, I just got myself a car a few weeks ago. It took maybe an hour, maybe probably an hour and a half altogether. I was probably annoyed that it took an hour and a half. And that's what is taking so long? Oh, we're putting the new stickers on your car. Okay, but hey, it's not. It's my whole Sunday here, guys. So
Yeah.
basically, we understand that a lot of other things should be happening relatively real time, right? Your car lease, your new credit card that you can charge fifty
Yep.
thousand dollars on. You never met anybody, but all of a sudden you want a house, and I don't even mean a $5 million house. You want a $500,000 house, and again, the average closing times takes 4 to 6 weeks. So we understand that there's a lot of issues in fintech that could be accelerated, but
Yep.
this is one that's really, really inefficient. So that's sort of why we want to that we're going after.
Got it. And so, like, I think there's like structural reasons why certain, the lending process takes as long as it does. But you're saying, hey, outside of the structural reasons, like, you have to wait certain days for whatever disclosures and things like that. You're saying, how can we compress all the other work that happens to as quick as possible, and let the clock play out as it needs to.
Well, yes, I guess I'm saying that. Let's say there's compliance issues, right? And maybe the Fed regs, and you can't actually do the loan in less than a week. Okay,
Sure.
but that doesn't mean you couldn't tell me that I've got the loan in a half an hour, right? Tell
Yep.
me I've got it. We'll have the closing date in a week, right? But to know that I've got the loan,
Yep.
just that notification, I've got the loan, I'm ready to move on the house.
Yeah.
That's 4 to 6.
Yeah. Like from a peace of mind perspective, you're a borrower, you're like, hey, I'm good here. I don't need to worry whether or not I need to send five other documents to you, or the documents I sent were good enough, or and so you just how do you reduce that limbo period and give them some sort of confirmation? Delivery can be kind of like, from an Amazon perspective, you order something and you get the confirmation immediately. You can trust the system that, hey, that, shampoo or whatever is going to arrive at your door in 2 weeks or 3 days or 2 days, etc.
Right, right. You get that confidence. You don't need to worry about it the whole time.
Yep.
Um, and also, you
Perfect.
don't need to be talking to three lenders at the same time. So we built a house and we were looking to do a construction loan, but the house was already half built. So you've got a
Hmm.
half built house doing a construction loan in New York State while there's a building moratorium going on. So we started with 10 lenders and ended up with TD Bank, but it's a whole process talking to each one over a couple of weeks till you get a commit from somebody. Right. So I think once you have that commit, you've got a peace of mind and you don't need to talk to everybody else.
Yep, makes sense. And then so when you guys are building your technology today, I guess like what is the product that you guys do sell today, and where do you guys sell to other fintechs, or do you guys have like a product that you sell to directly to the lenders, and help me understand like I guess like the product landscape.
Right. So mostly we have our MOS solution
Okay.
and it creates in real time with very little human in the loop. So a trusted data document layer where all the documents are understood and the data is all understood and pulled off and it's actionable. There's very little of it needs human review.
Okay.
Typically, a lot less than 10%. So very automated process.
Okay.
You think of a lender as documents come in every day, we
Yep.
understand what they are. They're routed to the right LO, the data's pulled off, it's already in LOS, it's actionable, right? So you
Sure.
don't have to spend time on data and documents or correcting them, very
Yep.
little. You always know what you've got. Are you waiting on a document from the borrower? Are they waiting on something from you? So you sort of know in real time what the state of that loan is.
Sure.
Is anything missing? Are the pay stubs stale? Is everything you have current? So it's the MOS solution really focuses heavily on the
Okay.
data and documents and creates a trusted uh, data layer. It's interoperable. It's its own platform, but it's fully interoperable and updates Encompass. So it always leaves Encompass fully updated in everything that you're doing. So if you're correcting pay stubs or W-2s, anything that you're doing in our MOS solution is automatically pushed to Encompass.
Okay. And then forgive me, but like, what does MOS stand for?
I think it's mortgage operating system.
Okay. So it's kind of like, do you guys think of it as like a almost like a point of sale? So is like something like a originator would use in lieu of a point of sale, or does it work with the point of sale? How do you guys kind of like
It
position
works
it?
with. I don't think it's in lieu of. I
Okay.
think it works together with. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Fascinating. And so, what about like underwriting? Is that like there's right now there's a lot of kind of I don't know if hype is the right word. Maybe there's a lot of VC dollars chasing AI underwriting. LOS companies are working on this too. And so, like, how do you kind of see the landscape of like AI underwriting? I feel like you've probably got one of the best perspectives or point of views on this. How are you kind of thinking about it? Is that like a space that you guys might want to play in, or I feel like you guys could theoretically build a underwriting system? How are you thinking about it?
Right, right, right. So, I mean, we have partners in the space. So we certainly partner with Candor, where they have an underwriting
Sure.
solution that they sell.
Yep.
We ourselves are, certainly thinking about building out more of a solution since we can automatically put together this trusted data layer, pretty
Okay.
much BPO free, very little BPO input. We certainly are interested in automated, solutions analyzers like an income analyzer, asset analyzer. So we're
Okay.
certainly exploring, extending solution set. Once you've got the data and documents in an automated way,
Yep.
you can certainly push solutions there. And I think underwriting is definitely a place to go. It's an important place to go. And I think machines could and should play in that space. I mean, one of the things you got to be sure about though is when you're trying to automate a cognitive space. So what's the difference between, let's say, current AI and RPAs, and where RPAs have brought us in the last 5 years, right? So
Sure.
robotic process automation is
Mhm.
automation where really there's no cognitive component. So you can't make mistakes because we're not asking the machine to write an essay. We're not asking it to really think out of the box. We're
Yep.
just saying, hey, execute this instruction set. And we trust it for that, right? So the issue here and the thing we've been pioneering is this notion of microservices with provability. So if I extract the data from a pay stub, but I can prove that everything I did was correct. I use multiple methods and I prove, hey, I use two different methods, get the exact same results off this pay stub. So
Got
believe it. You don't need to put a human on it. They do the
got
same thing for pay stub. Take a pay stub, slice and dice it at least two orthogonal ways. I believe
Yep.
it. Okay. So if we're pushing AI, we've got to know, not we think it's right, and therefore we're gonna lend you a house because we think it's right. There has to be some tighter notion of
Sure.
proving these assertions. So what we try to do in MOS, everything we do, classification, splitting, versioning, data extraction, everything that we're doing, cross validation, we prove the correctness of each event. And if it doesn't prove correct, we'll let you know, right? I think if you want AI to play effectively in underwriting, you've got to prove everything along the way. There's a lot of events in an underwrite. So you don't want to just be, hey, I think we should underwrite this house. What are all divided up to very, very small sort of micro service events, right? Each one needs to be, I'd say, provably correct, or you throw a flag. So we are in favor of letting AI play in that space. It is playing in that space. We have partners that play in that space. But I think you want to be able to prove that all the work you're doing is correct so that people will trust the AI. That makes sense?
Yeah. So it makes me think of your back testing early days. It's like you're about to execute maybe a certain type of trade or algorithm, it's kind of almost like you're testing whether or not your assumptions are true, and your system is actually built the right way. So similarly, like in this space, you're like, okay, this is a pay stub. Let's like calculate the income, or whatever calculations you need to do. You're verifying that in five, or two or five different ways, whatever that number looks like. Maybe.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Yes. I
Okay.
mean, you really have to verify everything you do. It's just that AI is great, but it makes mistakes. And I think thousands of really small decisions have to be made to make a loan. Like, is this your pay stub? Is it the most recent version? Do I see, your pay for this period? Am I sure that's a six and not an eight?
Yeah.
You know, there's some are very small, but there's thousands and thousands of things that all have to be right and aligned. Okay. So
Yeah.
the deal is that I think the way you do this, the way we're doing it, is you verify each step has to make sense. Am I sure
And
this
then,
is your pay stub most recent? Oh, you got to be sure that every step is correct. So for same thing for underwriting. Yeah, we can do automated underwriting, but you've got to check every event involved in the underwriting has got to be verifiable.
gotcha. And then what's your take? I know, like, with some of these new like image models, like you can generate really good looking fake, bank statements or whatever else. Like, with a sufficient intent, you can generate really high quality fraudulent documentation and things like that. What's your kind of take on that? How are you thinking about that? And like, what do you think the landscape's going to look like in a couple of years when perhaps that's even easier?
Right. So I think it's tricky. It used to be, if you look at Moses and the Ten Commandments, it's very easy to understand what was real and what was generated because the quality of graphics in virtual reality was so poor back then. But if you look at stuff that's Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, it's better, but
Hmm.
still quite obvious. These days it's very hard. I look at these videos all the time, trying to figure out what's real and what's not. So
Yeah.
if I go to a movie with my kids, I'm so busy figuring out what's real and what's generated that I can't necessarily enjoy the movie. You know,
Yeah.
so it's really tricky right now because it's gotten much better. So imagine it used to be really hard 2 years ago. I'm going to put together rich bank statements with lots of transactions and
Yeah.
pay stubs, W-2 and 1040. It's all going to be fake, right? There's no such guy. It doesn't even exist. It would have been virtually impossible. There's just so many things that have to interact. So just
Mhm.
like we're using AI right now to take apart these documents and be sure they all tell the same story, which we do. So we do cross validation. It's another thing our MLS does. All these documents, are they in sync? Do they tell the same story? And if not, you want to flag it. So, right, synchronicity is really important to be sure we believe in everything. Is anything out of whack? Well, it used to be maybe you'd forge one document and then you'd say, well, it's not consistent with the credit report. But what if
Sure.
you built everything from whole cloth? So AI is good enough that you have to worry about building a whole set of documents, complete
Yeah.
set. It's all fake, but it all
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So the answer to that, just like deep fakes are going to be much deeper than they were 3 years ago because of the AI and the computing power we didn't have, understanding deepfakes and making sure you understand they're not real is becoming a much harder task now than it was 3 years ago. It's doable, but it's more complex.
Yeah, I kind of think out of like I think about this kind of like from a cybersecurity perspective or just like a defensibility perspective. Uh, as much as from a sales perspective, you might want to like quickly underwrite and get the loan through the thing. You also need to think about it from a perspective of like, did we test all these set of documents against like these 100 different possible fraudulent attack vectors or risk vectors, and did we catch anything that looks a little off? And as much as they're using it to generate fake documents and things like that, you could also be using it from a defense perspective to actually uh, test whether or not the sets of documents that they're providing line up and tell the same exact story across the board. So it's more like a defense angle as well. Risk management and defense angle, I guess.
You know what it's like? I gave a lecture just like a month ago or 2 months ago to university,
Uh-huh.
sort of about the inroads that AI was making in different areas. And I had a lot of questions from the students about, well, if someone plagiarized, all theoretical, of course, someone plagiarized an essay or a report at the college level, can they really prove it was plagiarized? I mean, if AI is good enough to write it like a person, wouldn't it be indistinguishable? So there were some good questions really pointing to the fact that if AI is really doing its job, it's going to be as good as a human. And if it's as good as a human, then you're not necessarily going to write a program that will detect it and say, hey, this was machine generated.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pointed, and that relates to your issue of deep fakes. As the technology gets better, are we going to be able to consistently find this is a forgery or this is not consistent? Something here doesn't add up.
Yeah. Also, I think there's the other, and maybe this is what you're also saying, which is like, we're assuming that the humans are working 100% all at like all times. Like, what if it's like Friday and 4 p.m. and like you've got your kid's birthday party coming up at 6? Is the underwriter thinking the same exact level as Monday at 2 o'clock, right? Like, so there is like this drop off. Whereas with a like an automated system, there is no drop off, and then it's always going to be hopefully always at a consistent level, or there's a threshold um, that it's operating at, and like very little defect rate essentially as it's operating. So there is that aspect. So I think our general kind of assumption is that the human is always operating at like 100% optimal rate, and like they're doing it properly all the time. Um, I've had like conversations with folks in the underwriting space where they've even caught defective loans that were originated, and so it's like, wait a second, so like the underwriter missed this, and therefore like it's this loan is actually not legit, or like you might have to repurchase that. So sometimes the system is actually better than the human, possibly.
A very, very valid point because the system's not going to get tired. It's not going to get distracted.
Yep.
Saying, hey, we don't want to necessarily do the entire loan in the system without ever being a human is not the same as let the system do all the work and then let the human verify that it's correct. I mean, that certainly is a model that could work, right?
Yeah.
When we try to mimic human behavior, we see that there's typically an error rate of between 2 to 5%, and everything we're seeing from BPOs, it's not error free. So if I'm building a perfect system. Do I need it to be perfect, error free, or just much better than the normal BPO solution, right? So we consider provably correct when you get orthogonal methods to say the same thing, but that doesn't mean you're 100% correct. Usually that takes you about 99.5 or 99.75. Well,
Sure.
we're calling that provably correct because it's as perfect data as we're going to get sort of in this universe. I mean, the BPO is giving you about 97% correct, right? So if the machine can deliver 99.5, we'll take it, right? So I think we're not always looking for perfection. As long as we can, I think, hit rates of accuracy that are better than humans currently, I think
Yeah.
machines should be allowed to play that game. I mean, but of course, humans may say, "Well, wait a second, it's not perfect." Yeah, but your methods right now aren't perfect either. You've got
Yeah.
defects.
Correct. Yeah. It's a nuanced point for sure. Or I'm curious from a technology perspective. I got into the mortgage industry about 4.5 years ago, and even 4 years ago, when I was talking to lenders, there was a bit of Chris on the podcast calls it like he's got to pay for the ex's mistakes. Where basically, it seems like between 2000 and 2010, call it, or early 2010s, there was a lot of like founders building software, whether a bunch of different LOSs, point of sales, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's all these like roll ups that happened, and private equity bought a bunch of them and kind of rolled them up. And there was a bit of like a drought, and like also I feel like lenders generally have like at the time they had like a fairly bad kind of taste in their mouth when it comes to technology vendors and partners, nickeling and diming them and all kinds of stuff. Now I think there's again like a resurgence of a lot of founders building in this space, and um, generally I think the industry's optimistic but cautious. I think I would say there's definitely a lot of hype around AI, um, and a lot of promises being thrown around. We'll see whether or not those promises land, but I fear that if those promises don't land, then lenders are once again going to be left with this kind of like bad taste, bad aftertaste of being like potentially lied to, and like the technology not living up to the hype. What's your kind of perspective on this kind of trend? Maybe the last decade, but also like as we go forward in the future. How are you kind of thinking about this, and what have you seen from your perspective?
Right. So I think it's a really good point. I mean, there have been disappointments and AI's been hyped. So how is this all going to play out right now? Right. So, of course, we have lenders that may say, wait, why can't I just maybe build this myself? I'll just Hey,
Yeah.
Claude, I'll put a system together myself. Yeah, but it'll be 90% correct all the time. You'll never know when it's correct, and you won't be provably correct, and you'll be disappointed. You'll have the same buyer's remorse that someone would have if the system is partially right some of the time, but never right all the time. You can't rely on it. It's not
Yeah.
automating. You got to
Yeah.
check everything it does really. So I think unless you come up with these more rigorous protocols, you're not going to move things forward. I mean, it's a little different than I don't know chess, where every 3 years it got definitively better. Okay, here I think people we haven't moved. The time to cut a loan is not better than 30 to 45 days. So it hasn't really improved in 30 years. And I think people want to see that needle move, and lenders want to see reduction in expenses is costing a certain amount to manufacture a loan, but can we cut that in half? So I think the answer is, I mean, we're I think putting in some of the things that have to happen for this to move. So in order to automate stuff, you have to actually believe that everything is correct. I mean, do I believe in the data? Do I believe it's not fraudulent? Does everything add up? Can I make decisions based on it? So it's a step by step. But if at the lowest level, foundational level, the data and documents are not trusted, then the
Yeah.
whole thing falls apart. What we've seen right now, and forget AI, the way current lenders do it is they have a certain amount of error in documents and data and assertions that they
Yeah.
tolerate. And then they figure that every subject matter expert will find the problems if they exist. So
Yeah.
underwriting will find a problem if you've overstated your income, or if the pay stub doesn't add up,
Sure.
or if you had a problem post close, we'll figure out that there's a problem there. So instead of saying let's be sure, absolutely sure, that everything stated about this loan is correct and we can act
Yeah.
on it, that hasn't been the case. There has a certain amount of errors, and they figure subject matter experts will repair them. Well, in AI, you can't rely on the subject matter expert with common sense to find those errors. So I
Sure.
think that foundation layer's got to be accurate. So we're starting with the basics, but I think you can build if the data and document layer is a trusted layer that's been provably correct. I think you then act on it with underwriting rules that are consistent, like Fannie, Freddie, etc. And I think start to have things that are decidable or agentic AI. And once you believe in that foundational layer, you
Yeah.
can make decisions. So do I think we're going to have a case here where 3 years from now it all falls apart and everybody starts thinking AI was really not working and we were all sold a bag of goods? I don't think so. I think this time it's the real deal. But
Okay.
having said that, there'll be a lot of charlatans along the way selling stuff that is not going to necessarily work out. But is the field moving forward? I think the field is moving forward.
Nice. And then so like again, it's a couple questions. Maybe the first one is like, um, is it safe to say you would agree that lenders should be using AI or be considering these solutions? I'm guessing the answer there is yes. Would you agree there?
Yeah, we just presented, I think it's Housing Wire with Fairway, which is a large client of ours, and
Yep.
they're really sort of leading, really pushing AI. And I think what if they can start doing things in half the time or a third of the time, then their LOs are going to have a competitive edge that no one else will have. So I think the answer is, AI is happening.
Yep.
It's real. We see it, definitely reducing times in certain areas dramatically. So I think if you're a mid-size or a smaller lender and you don't start taking AI seriously, you're going to sort of be left behind, because the larger lenders, the Rockets and the
Yeah.
Fairways, are going to leave you behind. They're going to have much more advanced technology.
Got it. Yeah. And then so for that, smaller, maybe even mid-sized lender, we've had a bunch of people on the call before, and I think a sentiment in the market, I don't want to speak for everybody, but a sentiment that I've heard in the market is if you're on the lender side and you're maybe like in sales or compliance or even vendor management, you're seeing a lot of different pitches all day long. Some of them start to sound the same. And maybe people are buying multiple different solutions within the organization. And um, it feels like the early innings, and so like people are not sure like which vendor is going to actually like be the one that is going to be successful or the one that's going to like help them the most. So there's a bit of like caution, like too many choices. I'm not in so many choices. I'm not even sure which one to pick. And then they kind of like puts them in paralysis to some degree. How should like what's the right framework, or what would be the framework you would approach If you were in somebody like a lender's shoe, and you've got all these pitches, in your email inbox, or you go to a conference and you have like 50 different vendors pitching you on different AI solutions, should they be taking those demos, or should they be actually looking inwards and figuring out like what the state of their organization is? Like, I think you've done a lot of the business process optimization or automation. What is the like a solid like fundamental framework, whether it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like what holds true, and what's the right approach to kind of thinking about AI solutions today, and how should a lender approach that?
Okay, a really, really good question. There's like sort of a bunch of questions in your question there. So I'm going to try to unroll it, unravel a little bit. I
Yep.
think the biggest problem that I've seen in AI, even back when I worked for Paul Tudor Jones in the 90s, I mean, solve one problem. Don't try to boil the ocean. So we were just at that time trying to have machines trade financial derivative trading in real time. And that was sort of the goal, right? So pretty narrow, very well defined. I think the issue here is you'll have a lender or bank come in and say, "Hey, can we sort of automate what we're doing with AI? It looks pretty cool." I mean, IBM was trying to sell AI horizontally with Watson for many, many years. It really wasn't successful because I don't think for the most part it's a horizontal sale. I mean, you could talk about ChatGPT chatting with you horizontally across everything. Yeah, but it's not running my company for me, right? So I
Mhm.
think what you need to automate in business is you need to really believe the system can be trusted and I don't have to check all its work. So I think it
Yeah.
starts with verticalized solutions, meaning I would take, for example, for me, I was the operating officer, chief operating officer for a large lender. I look at my primary areas that I really could automate. Either they're very, very expensive to me to man them, and I'd like machines to operate there, or maybe if I could do it much faster, I'd gain a lot more business. Okay. Take the two or three areas where you think automation AI can really, really help you. Don't worry about everything else. Often we're talking to 5, 10, 12 business stakeholders. You can't sell to all at the same time. So find what's really important to you, identify those one or two areas. And then first thing I would see is don't trust your IT group may say they can do it. Yeah, 95% of the time they will not be able to do it. It's really hard stuff to get it right. I mean, moving from ChatGPT saying, "Hey, let me do something for you. That looks nice," to running your system in enterprise strength solution in real time,
Yeah.
um, keeping your LOs and your clients and lenders and build everybody happy is tricky. So I think you really want to rely on somebody who can deliver, but how do you know that, right? So the best thing would be you have a problem or two you really want to automate, and you see people that have automated that. It de-risks it for you. If
Yeah.
somebody's using an AI company that's delivering, right, that de-risks it. If it's people just pitching to you, you don't know if it's going to work or not. You really don't. So there's risk. And I'm not saying you should never take the risk because sometimes the people that take that risk first are the ones that have the solution 2 years before everybody else. But there's a lot more risk when you do that. So
Yep.
to de-risk it, you say, okay, let me find a lender or two where they are doing their
Yeah.
digital mail fully automatically, which is like something that we do, right? And they can see, okay, they have a reference that's working for them, right? So
Sure.
that de-risks it. If it's already in production in places, and you can know that hey, this worked for somebody. I mean, I don't have to be the first person trying it.
Yeah. So that's a good step to start. And then like how would you get even more granular, like to double click on that? Like um it's a good way to maybe source a vendor of like, okay, like, Fairway uses them and maybe we should talk to them and see if we can implement them. Would you like, how do you instill the entire company from a cultural perspective to go and find these areas for improvement? Because like the COO, I'm sure they've got like 50 fires happening all at the same time. They're running around meetings after meeting. So like um, sure they can be the one to go pick that one or two spot, but sometimes they're also like, abstracted away a little bit from the day to day, such that maybe they're not even fully aware of, the actual areas for improvement. So I think some of it has to come from bottoms up of like, from top down, in the sense that as a leader, you need to kind of like, instill in your people that, that they need to kind of bubble up these problematic areas and opportunities for improvement. So, like from a cultural perspective, don't you think that's also important as well?
Absolutely. I mean, within a division, maybe they should be aware of the fact, hey, there's a lot of AI stuff out there, and why don't we see if what we're doing right now can be
Yeah,
innovated, can be done more effectively. I mean, that's what we do with our own developers here and the people that I work with is, hey, can Claude, can Chat GPT, can Quen make our life simpler? Can we use it? So we definitely encourage people to see which AI tools are available to them to use to get their work done right. That's different than the company saying, hey, we want a company initiative to optimize home lending using
sure.
AI, and we're going to pursue that, right? So bottom up for use within divisions, I think it should come from practitioners. We usually have the people practicing that are using it, the early adapters within our company that are using it, and we have them show to everybody else, hey, this is cutting my time to write dev code in half, and so certainly encourage that, and that is bottom up. I agree with you, but the initiatives, where do you want to optimize it? Typically, at the company level, are coming from the CFO, or they're coming from the COO saying operationally, hey, our competitors are a lot faster than us, or CFO saying our competitors can do it for a lot less. We've got to cut our cost structure down. So that
Yeah,
I think that kind of thing should be top down.
gotcha. Um, And then, have you heard of this concept of like the center of excellence, where basically there's like a group within inside the company that goes around and find it's like essentially like internal consultants, right? They're like essentially the group that's like, okay, we're gonna go over here and then go fix these problems over here, and then once we do that, like, have you seen that concept play out in mortgage? I haven't come across that as much. I think maybe I'm guessing some of the bigger companies like maybe a Fairway or a Rocket, UWM, etc. They might have center of excellences, but like I haven't come across that as much in the medium to small size lenders space. Is like, what have you seen there, and like what's worked there?
Yeah, I haven't seen it so much either. So I think in our previous company, Steven, we sold sort of horizontally. Yeah, some of these larger companies, like a General Motors, might have a center of excellence, or they
Yeah,
may have an innovation group. You might be
yeah,
talking to the chief innovation officer. So we definitely had that.
okay,
In the mortgage space, I haven't seen it very much. I don't know why. I don't. Maybe they're not large enough typically to have a center of excellence. So
sure,
I haven't seen it. I don't think it's a bad place for innovation to play if you have an office that just sort of focuses on that. I
yeah,
think that would. But you might need to be a large enough company for that to really make sense.
sure, yeah. Probably like mid-size to larger is, or like mid-size and growing is probably like a good time to kind of like think about implementing some sort of center of excellence. I know before we went live, you had some ideas that you were, or some questions that you've come across lenders thinking about. Do you want to jump to some of those questions and topics?
Yeah, sure. But just to your point, also, I do think that we do get sometimes the person to lead the effort at a lender to change would be the chief strategic officer.
Yep.
So that is sometimes, somebody with that title is
Yeah.
looking for, hey, how do I AI power this company so that in
Yeah.
3 years from now we'll be in a different place? Often that might be like the CSO and coming from strategy
Yeah.
or biz dev.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think what I've seen, at least from our perspective when we go into sales cycles and things like that, is that oftentimes lenders don't actually have like their own documentation. Sorry, their processes documented. So somebody's doing the job, but the documentation is just, oh, I've just done it this way forever, and so they are like kind of like fish in water where they don't realize like, hey, this there's a better or more efficient way to do this, or more automated way to do it. So then they end up just doing it, and then maybe they retire or they leave the company, and then all that knowledge walks out the door. And so then now the next person has to spend more time essentially picking up the pieces rather than figuring out how to rebuild the system in a more automated fashion. So oftentimes my thought process, and we used to I was trained as an industrial engineer, and so like a lot of like lean Six Sigma type of stuff, and like early career was just literally helping companies document their processes, and then figuring out all the they call it muda in IE, right, which is like waste, and like helping them figure out like, hey, why are you clicking 5 buttons when you can just press this one button, or you can write a script that automates XYZ. And so I think that's the place to start. Like, start documenting your processes, and then even if like companies can set up like an internal Obsidian or internal wiki of like, here's how this part of the process works. Here's how we underwrite these type of loans, and just like document it that way. Whether it's a vendor that you're going to use today or a vendor that might not even exist today but will in 18 months, you have all of that context up to date and fresh. That way you can plug it in, or you can even like literally take the vendor's API documentation and plug in your wiki documentation into Claude and see, does this vendor actually help any part of my company? And so there's like, I think there's like things like that that you could do. But the one thing I harp on is like document your processes. That way you can actually like holistically think about these solutions and not just kind of in an isolated perspective of how is it only solving this one piece, but how does it solve for the larger system at play. That's my
Yeah,
take.
I think really, really good point. So the previous company we had, C Vision, we were helping automate some of the largest accounting firms. So like Deloitte was an example. And let's say that a firm has 200 offices, right? And
Yep.
we had a K1 automation product that would help, the tax practitioners automatically prep K1s, including a lot of the supplemental pages and stuff. Would turn out that with hundreds of offices, the way that Deloitte did it was very, very regionally and even office to office. So you have
Yep.
a process that within the firm isn't well defined or not
Yep.
so well defined. Now you
Yep.
want a bot to really learn it and do it well when the process is actually quite diverse and vague.
There's
You know,
200
so
ways to do it.
that's yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so I think one of the first things, if you want automation, is define the process. And if it's not consistent within your org,
Yeah.
maybe bring in somebody to make sure it is. So if you've got the East Coast, West Coast, and maybe the Dallas region's doing differently, maybe just put a team together and say, look, this is how we're going to do it moving forward. Because when you have to train off of all these different offices or these different stakeholders, and they're doing it differently, the machine gets very confused
Yep.
and very noisy, and the error coefficient is high. It's all because the process itself isn't so well defined. So, to your point, the first thing is let's be sure the process we're trying to solve is a well defined process, right? And if we solve it really well, let's be sure it's solving an important problem, money wise, time wise, et cetera, because we're going to spend time. So, pick the right problem or two. Be sure
Yep.
it is a well defined problem and it's solvable, right? And
Yep.
then and then let the AI, have at it. And I think there will be success. But I think you also got to talk about change management, I think is also important. So
Big time.
if we're putting AI automation into a company, a lot of times the issue is, well, I have a job when this is all over. And also, do I need to really change what I do? Because I like what I do and I know how to work in Compass
Yep.
right now. And I don't want to have to relearn my skill set, right?
Yep.
So the answer should be, yeah, AI is here to help you, right? It's going to enhance what you do. It's not hopefully going to replace anybody, but also, um, it's going to, in terms of change management, you're looking for, I guess, minimally invasive methods. Okay, so we spend time with the product group at the lender saying, look, we can build this AI in 3 or 4 different ways. How do we construct it so that your guys or your system doesn't need to change very much to
Yep.
realize the full benefit of the automation, right? So don't minimize, yes, number one, to your point about industrial engineering, don't minimize the process. If the
Yeah.
process isn't well defined, AI is not going to make it any more well defined.
Yeah.
Is it vague? It's going to learn that vagary and that's going to introduce noise, right? So make sure the process is well defined.
Yeah.
Number one, number number one, and then number two, you probably don't want everybody. You got 10,000 employees here that are going to be using our MOS release. Maybe you don't want to retrain them more than you strictly have to. So, what's a
Yeah.
minimally invasive way to give you the full benefits of automation, but not really change much in terms of workflow or your processes, right?
Correct.
And
Thousand
you
percent.
think through all that. It's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. When you were talking about Deloitte example, for my college capstone, I interned at Make a Wish my junior year, and then my senior year, I went back for a capstone, and they were doing this rehaul at the time. I think it was called Project Galaxy, but you know I worked at the national chapter, the main office in Phoenix, and they were so the way the organization is set up, you have your main headquarters, and then every state has its own essentially chapter. Think of it kind of like a franchise, for lack of a better analogy. Um, and so you assume, oh, the wishes were just granted, a homogenous, like standardized way. But basically, it was a very entrepreneurial or like kind of like grassroots organization where like the chapter in Arizona might grant the wish one way, and the chapter in San Francisco that's got a lot more capital and resources and donors and things like that can grant the wish slightly different way. And so my job during the capstone was to essentially sit down with all these different chapters and essentially document how every chapter grants wishes, and then figure out what's the most standardized approach that, from a headquarter perspective, they can share like the best practices and the best resources, and say, hey, we're going to do this one consistent process for every single wish, so that every wish kid has like the most optimal and optimized kind of wish experience essentially. And you would notice all kinds of just like interesting like patterns. Like for example, some chapters would use like a system like Salesforce or HubSpot to actually manage the wish granting process, and they'd be like, these are the different stages. And the other chapters would just be, it would just be in an email or a spreadsheet. And so like it was all kinds of like variation you would notice. And again, kind of like your Deloitte example, it's like a wish granting process would be so different depending on like who's running the process, what have they learned from their previous experiences. And at the time there was no kind of way to like recursively like gather the context and like share the knowledge back with your peers within your company or organization that are also granting wishes, but maybe in a different state or something like that. So similar, I think I see the same pattern in mortgage, where it's like whether across the industry but also within a company that's regionally kind of like separated as well.
Right, 100%. I mean, one thing you gain also when you force sort of a standard process. I mean, it's natural if you have chapters, then maybe everybody does it a little bit differently, and all of a sudden you want to standardize it. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of a nuisance to force that standardization, but all of a sudden it gives you much better quality control because everybody's doing it the same way. Much more
Yeah.
meaningful analytics. Time to close. Well, am I doing it the same way? Maybe some offices a lot less diligence and they're closing faster. It's not apples to apples. So by
Yeah.
putting the same standards in place, what you get for that is you all of a sudden have a lot of value in the metrics. The analytics of 10,000 people who do the same thing the same way, and you can try
Yeah.
to figure out who's more productive, who's more efficient, right? So it really makes sense. I mean, of course, initially it sort of makes sense that maybe all these different regions are going to be doing it differently. But what you get from consolidation is the ability to automate it, but also the ability to really see how you're doing, just to look at metrics that have meaning and to optimize process that you've got.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think there was one more idea or topic that you had on your docket that you want to talk about. I think, or did we cover all of
Well,
them?
I've got a few. I got a question. How much time do you have? But let's talk about noise. The real world has got noise, and
Yeah.
so people will complain. Oh, you want me to learn off of your client data, but there's 3 to 5% BPO noise in here. I can't deal with it. It's noisy. My API can't handle noise. You know, I mean, our view on that is get over it because people have to deal with noise. Noise is life. So a system that can't learn in a noisy environment,
Hmm.
it can't learn. I mean, if we go to a client, they're going to have a certain error rate that their people have been making,
Yeah.
BPOs, even the underwriters, whoever. There is a human error rate, right? So the trick is that typically when you're learning something, are you learning noise or you're learning something that gives you a better model? If you're learning on the noise, then typically if you run the piece of noise that you just try to introduce into your model actually gives you worse results over time, not better results. Just like overfitting to a very
Mm,
specific data set will give you worse results in the long term. So will fitting to noise. So I think instead of talking about let's change the reality on the ground, well, the reality on the ground is whatever we're going to see from clients, their metrics, their data, their documents will have some noise in it. I think
yeah.
you've got to be able to learn with the noise that's there instead of wishing there was a different, perfect, noise-free environment, which you'll never get.
Yeah. And I think what you can do is like if you build a system in a way where again, this is where the human in the loop is important as well. So you I assume you build it with the whatever percentage of noise, whether it's 3 to 5%, let's say. And then over time your system kind of takes over majority of like the grunt work, and um whatever the error rate is or failure rate is, you have a human take a look at it and give feedback on why that's actually wrong. So now you're using the human's best judgment on figuring out the errors, rather than all the good stuff that's like the system can already pick up on, and then you can feed that back to the system and ultimately fit it accordingly or properly and get the error, reduce the error rate, rather than having a human do the entire thing all the time.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I started in Maryland, uh, late 80s, early 90s. My thesis was on driverless cars. So we had a huge lab there for Center for Automation Research trying to get cars to drive themselves. Well, I test drove a Tesla, like 2 months ago,
Yeah,
and it's still when it gets stuck,
yeah,
it's gonna vibrate, it's gonna stop, and it's gonna vibrate and have you take over. So what's happened in the last 30 years in this area is we've minimized the times when we need to ping a human. We're getting smarter and smarter. We're not removing the human because there'll always be super complicated
yep,
cases where you haven't modeled them. You know what I mean? The
yep,
worst intersection in New York City on the worst day, snow, it's hail. There's a huge truck barreling right towards you. So it's hard to think that you're going to model everything that can ever happen. But what we
yep,
want is as machines get smarter to pick a human less and less, not to negate the human, but
yep.
to require fewer humans, contributing less humans in the loop as we move AI forward.
Yeah, and I think the point, just to add to this, is that I think the assumption is that, and maybe some of the narrative is like, oh, we're going to get rid of people in the mortgage industry, and I don't think that's the right assumption. I think the way lenders should think about it is like, hey, right now we're operating at this level because this is how many resources we have, this is how many human capital we have. Um, it's like if you can have a system take over a lot of the grunt work that they're doing, there's all these other things that we could be doing to deliver a way better client experience to these borrowers that we're currently not able to even do because our people are locked up in all these other tasks. So it's like, I think it's kind of like a lowest common denominator type of thinking, to be like, what's the least I can do to get this customer? It's like, well, I think the client experience or the borrower experience, they're going to want more when you give them more, and so that's going to be the new standard. It's not like they're going to maintain their standard of like expectation. So like, if you're able to underwrite faster or you're able to deliver the loan faster, there's going to be all these other um, expectations that come along as human desire, increases. So I don't know. I think um, there's a lot more things that people can do within these companies, and it's not a fixed set of tasks.
100%. When you talk about optimizing a rocket or whoever fairway, I think we're not probably talking about doing it with fewer people. You're saying, hey, we're going to take some of the grunge work and free people up to be more creative and maybe work more on how do we
Exactly.
grow the business,
Exactly.
right? Make
Yep.
clients
Yeah.
and repurpose the people we have to do stuff that machines can do and let them focus more on the creative stuff we need to build a company.
Yeah. How do you serve a different, new demographic of buyers that are coming into the market? How are they thinking? How do we market to them? How do we serve them in ways that they want to be served? And there's all these other creative things that they could be doing. But again, I'm sure you worked in, like, when I was at Goldman, for example, Goldman was like very much like go 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 all the time, and there was never like downtime to actually like think creatively about like solving problems. And it was like, and when I was at Make a Wish, it was the exact opposite. It was like it was never like, like nonprofit is a very like kind of slow moving kind of like, there's this, oh, you have a
Workshop.
lot of time to think of it. Right. And so I think you need like the right balance where there is a lot of things that you need to do during the day, but at the same time, you have enough downtime and breathing room to actually think about the work that you're actually doing, such that you can think of creative ways to solve problems and serve your constituents, whether it's, internal facing clients or external facing clients.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the right use of AI
Yeah.
is to take the grunge stuff, be sure machines can do it well, verify they do it well, and free the humans to do the stuff that is more cognitive and more creative.
Yeah. Ari, this has been we're at time, so I feel like we could probably go on for another 2 hours. I do want to respect your time. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I don't know who our next guest is, so let me just take a quick look. We typically ask um, a question to the next guest. Let me just look this up real quick. Hang with me. So our next guest is Josh Bob. He is building a marketing solution. So it's like a CRM type campaign builder solution for loan officers. He's a founder and it's a tech company. So I'm curious if you have any questions for Josh, maybe about how he's thinking about technology or the business. I'd be curious if you have any questions that you'd like to ask him.
Well, yeah, I mean, sort of it I mean, sounds like a great space. I guess I would ask him what's broken in the CRM space. So typically, if we come into a space, we'd like to feel, okay, there's something broken, I'm gonna make it better. So
Very
yeah,
good.
what's broken in the space and how is AI gonna fix it?
Awesome. Brilliant. I will ask him that on the next show. Ari, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like, again, we could go for longer. You have a really interesting perspective. You've seen a lot in this space specifically. Your Paul Tudor Jones background is super fascinating. That was not on Claude nor your LinkedIn. So I'm very excited to
My
hear
first
more about
thoughts.
that. Yeah, very cool.
DK, thank you. This has been great.
Thank you
Really
so much.
enjoyed
I
it.
appreciate it. Yeah.